welcome back, welcome back. Hey, I'm Brother Brian here on KIEZ 106.7 FM, the voice of the community. Hey, I had to reach out to an old cohort of mine to see how he's doing. And we've been trying to get together for a period of time, but hey, there's no better day than the present. And Dr. Armstrong, I want to thank you for carving out some time out of your schedule to sit down and chat with me so we can discuss economic development. But before we do, how are you doing, sir?
I'm hanging in there. I'm doing all right, Brian. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Dr. Armstrong, it's been a long time. I see that periodically you may write articles in the local newspaper. And prior to that, you were an advocate in the community, attempting to fight for many different challenges and issues because you ran for mayor at one time. Then you actually sat in the seat of the first district. So what have you been up to since that time frame?
Brian, just to list the things I've been doing, it'd be hard that we'd run out of time just listing the things that I'm doing. But I look at doing points in economic development. And my focus has been especially on the South side. Actually, I'm looking at massive economic development along the Northeast Delta, going all the way from the Mississippi River, developing the port and the rail and the airport there. But that's an entirely different topic. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the economic development of Monroe. And my interest especially has been on the South side. I see great opportunity in the South side. And I need to look at developing that.
Okay, all right. Now, when you say economic development, geographically, how did you actually decide to focus on the traditional South end of Monroe? What presented that opportunity?
Well, if I look at the city of Monroe, the city of Monroe is unfortunately racially divided. We need to fix that. We need to eliminate the racial divide if we're ever going to be the great city that we can be. And there is great opportunity on the South side for that economic development. And so I've looked at doing that. I've worked on projects over the years, and then they're coming together. So I have talked with Pat Moore. And Pat Moore wants to set up a Zoom call with me and with Katrina to talk about some of the plans for economic development. The SEDD has a 25-year plan that they have put out, and I don't want to divert from that. I just want to say I want to add to that and look at specific things that can be done in a shorter period of time than the 25-year period of time that they're looking at to develop that. There are things we can do now, but I think there are things that we have to look at and we have to understand. And to solve any problem, you have to know what it is. I had a long talk with Ellen Hill. I think the world of Ellen Hill. She's very bright, very capable, and we need to join Ellen Hill into developing this, and also Earl Davis. Earl Davis is very talented, very qualified, but Earl Davis points out some of the problems we have here. Let's just talk about that and talking about the problems. When I lost my bid for mayor, I have a number of Black friends that I've kept those Black friends over the years. And I talked to one of them and I said, I'm disappointed because I could have done so much for the Black community. And he says, but Dr. Armstrong, he says, it's always been this way. We can live the way that it is. That's not a good answer. The answer to him is to talk with Earl Davis. Earl Davis has two very bright, qualified students, children. They don't want to come back to Monroe. We need to fix that. We need to develop a community pride in Monroe, and that involves the South side as well as the North side. and we need to give them something to look forward to coming back to. That's not something that you do overnight. It's something that you have to look at it, and you have to plan to do that. But that can be done, and it should be done. And there are little pieces that can be done. But if you look at the quality of life issues that we need to look at, I think high on the list, if not the top of the list, is crime. And for me, I would divide crime into several segments. So one of them, I was look at generational causes of crime and contributions to crime, and looking at trying to eliminate that. Bill Gates has set up a program for kids from 6 months up to 3 years to look at mentoring and developing, and we need to look at that. But also, if we look at an after-school program, Broaden Horizons is a good after-school program, but there's several of them, but they've been very, very successful. And Broaden Horizons, something like 10 years ago, went into a high crime, high poverty area in West Monroe. And they set up an after-school program, and they set up positions for 15 students. And they asked the question of themselves, how many of these spaces are we going to fill? How many places, how many people are going to want to stay after school for this program? They filled every space that they had, and they've been going on for a long period of time. Until we had COVID hit, they had almost 500 students, and they are all in the parish schools. There are none in the city schools. We need to fix that. But if you look at the result of it, there was almost no incidence of crime in those kids all the way to graduation, to 12th grade. Almost no crime. That's generational solutions to crime. The second thing is there was no incidence of teen pregnancy, and they worked on developing that. The other thing is they raised the grade point average from less than 1 to over 3, less than 1 to over 3 grade point averages. And we need to do that in our city schools also. And I've talked to the city school board, and they're interested in that. I've talked with Betty and Mr. Sampanera about extending the Broaden Horizons program into the city schools, and we might even do it as a pilot to pick one school and then eventually develop to where we have programs for all of the kids. But if we can finish kids, let's go back to Broaden Horizons. You can't even get in the Army, can't even get in the military unless you have a high school degree. But we got those kids high school degrees. And in addition to that, we found ways to send some of those kids to college. I mean, okay. Part of the reason why they signed up for that after school program is very sad. We fed them a meal. And for some of those kids, they didn't know where their next meal was going to come from. And we fed them a meal, so they stayed. So we have to fix that. The poverty in districts 3, 4, and 5, Tony Little tells me it is up over 60%. And we need to address that, and we need to fix that. And that can be done. And so in an area where there is that much poverty and you have a plan, I talked to, shoot, I can't remember his name, but anyway, but he mentioned that if you have a plan in a high poverty area, then you can look at CDBG funds and you can get some major money for development from CDBG funds. Let me leave that and come back to it. And let's talk at a next level of crime and education and where we can do some good. So I took one of the Black leaders, actually he took me, and we met with about 15 or 20 kids, I say kids, they were ages 15 to 25 years of age. They dropped out of high school. They didn't have a skill. They didn't have an education. And so they resorted largely to crime and to drugs and whatever. We can fix that. And what we did is we offered them a program where we could give them a skill. The emphasis largely was been given giving them a high school education. To hell with the high school education, give them a skill. They get the high school education later. You can't eat with the high school education, but you can eat with the skill. And so if they have a skill, they can look on at developing. So the problem that we had is we could do something with that skill, and we can set up programs with plumbing and electricity and drywall and other things that needed to be done. We could set those up in the rec centers. The problem that we had was that it was transportation, and so we couldn't get them to those places. Now let me back up and say that the city has school buses, not school buses. They have buses for transportation. They rotate those buses out from time to time. This past year, I went to the city and I says, "How many buses are you retiring?" He says, 3. One of them is not any good. It just needs to be trashed. But 2 of them were decent. They're not full-size buses, but they're medium-sized buses. Now, let me tell you what I can do with the buses. Let me take let's paint them blue. Let's paint them a police blue and put a volunteer driver in that bus and get them to drive to high-risk areas over on the south side. You open the door, and the first thing is you set up a little library there. And so they have books. They can borrow the books like you do from a library, and shoot, if they bring them back, fine. If they don't bring them back, I can get them some more books. The next thing you can do there is laptop computers are cheap. If you try to go to a library and find a computer, you can't find a computer because they're all full. But I can put 3 laptop computers on each one of those buses. That'd be 6 computers. I can find mentors and open the doors, and you can have the kids and the adults both come in with a mentor that shows them how to use the computers. And that is something very, very productive for them. Now, let's look at the third thing. Let's go back to those kids 15 to 25. They didn't have transportation. I got 2 buses now. Pick them up and take them to the places to give them skills. We got the buses. The police department owns those buses now. I arranged that. The city released those buses. They are licensed to the police department, and the police department is not using them at all right now. That's a shame. We need to fix that. And part of the reason why Chief tells me if they don't use them is because of the cost of insurance. We need to fix that. This is something we can make a major difference by providing a trust and a pride. I mean, put a little siren on the bus so that just like the ice cream truck, people drive by and they see or they hear this thing and they find a friendly voice where somebody's going to do them some good. You know, we got so many donut shops. I bet you I can find donuts every day to put some donuts on those buses too. I don't know what we can do, but let me look at another thing that I did, and I back it up. But several years ago, I looked at reentry programs for inmates that are getting out of prison. They get out of prison, they got no skill, they got no place to go, and they go back to jail. We got to fix that, and we can fix that. And so one thing that I started back then, and the state picked it up, and it is active right now, is we have started skills training for inmates and some of those are even taking some online classes. 1 or 2 of them have actually gotten degrees by the time that they get out of prison. And so if they have a skill, if they can work, they're going to do that, and they're not going back to jail. So we stop the recidivism, and Delta Community College has been very, very helpful in helping us to develop that. So these are part of the problems, but this links crime and it links in education. If you look at other statistics, a third grader who finishes the third grade and cannot read or do math at grade has an 80% chance of going to jail. We know who they are. We can fix it, and we have to fix it. And if we look at other instances, if we look at the shooters in schools and in shopping centers around the country, 90% of those come from single family homes. So how do we address that? And I talked to Pat Moore about that. Maybe we need to get the churches involved in helping us to develop our structure here. Another thing that we know is that of inmates in prison, their children have a 7 times increased risk of following their parents to jail. We know who they are. We need to get them, and we need to fix that. And we can fix it.
Well, Dr. Armstrong, you shared a lot about quality life in the city of Monroe. You've identified geographically specific areas. So let's dig a little bit deeper in a couple and you definitely sound like you've been in contact with a lot of the leaders in the community. And you're a visionary. So as we talk about, I want to dig deeper on the economic development, but I've been making some notes here as you spoke about education, teen pregnancy, the criminal aspect in the community, hunger with the children so they can stay focused. And ultimately, the greatest needs in our city is districts 3, 4, and 5. Now, last week, we spoke about economic development. I want to take everything from a granular idea or level, and let's break it down. You and I had a discussion briefly about the train system that flows through the city of Monroe, or the railroad system. Now, you had some ideas, some futuristic visionary ideas about how we can actually capitalize on the services that are actually taking place. Can you break that down for me?
Well, if we look at trains, don't hold me to the exact figure, but there's something like 80 trains a day that go through the city of Monroe. None of those trains stop in Monroe. That's not completely true, because on Texas Avenue, they have a rail spur where they drop off rock. But there are 3 rail spurs in the city of Monroe. And each of those rail spurs needs to be developed where we have trains bring in industry and commerce and brings something. It's there. We have 2. We have the possibility of developing at least 1 more, maybe 2 more rail spurs into the city, and then that brings in business. Business brings in jobs, and that brings in economic development and health to the community. So that's relative to the trains. The trains, the meeting that they had at ULM a week or so ago was talking mostly about passenger, and they're talking about a passenger train that runs across the state and stops in Shreveport, Ruston, Monroe, and in Delhi. But it's passenger. We need to look more than passengers. We need to look also at business development of what trains can build us, and that they can bring and build us business and jobs into the community. We need to develop that.
All right. So more specifically, you're discussing about the cargo trains where they can actually stop, because Washita Parish is centrally connected to the land, rail, air. So there's great opportunity. Now, when you were running for mayor, is there anything that you had designed or contemplated, and when you're running for mayor compared to the current administration, how it can be improved today?
Well, you know, everybody has their own ideas.
That's right.
Mayor Ellis has his own ideas, that he's working at improving the infrastructure and repairing a lot of the things that are there. And I applaud him for what he's doing. But again, if we look at the river port development, I think that's wonderful, but it doesn't bring jobs. We need to focus more on jobs. That's my focus. It's going to be great for the community, but we need to bring jobs. The other thing is the zoo is a major asset, and of course, the city council turned down the phase one for improving and development of the zoo because the estimates came in at 3 times what the projections were. But we need to look at doing things to develop the zoo, because the zoo brings people into Monroe. When people come to Monroe, they eat at our restaurants and spend money. They buy gas and they spend money, and they do all kinds of things here. And so we need to look at things that bring in the economic development. And I think the zoo is another good asset that's there.
All right. Yeah, I definitely appreciate you sharing that information based on commerce and also based on tourism. And absolutely, tourism definitely brings in actual dollars to the local community, from transportation to gasoline, services. So yeah, we definitely have something right here in our midst we can capitalize on. But I want to definitely focus on the economic development, focus on the training aspect of it. You mentioned about re-entry training, which is something I want to talk to you on our next conversation. But the training itself at the local school level, we talking about skill training. What conversation have you had about improving the actual immediate workforce or the skill training for our young adults in our community?
Well, there are programs now that are looking at skills development, but we need to look at doing more. The state has a program, and let's see, help me with what it's called. It's Shreveport. It's in I can't think.
Job Corps.
Job Corps.
Okay.
But I can take 20, 25 kids right now and send them to Shreveport for 2 years, and they will house them, feed them, clothe them, and give them a skill. And you know, Brian, I've talked to several here, and they don't want to go. They want to stay in Monroe. Why can't we bring that program to Monroe? And we should be able to bring that program to Monroe to develop our skills and develop a job corps. That's a federal program. There's money involved in doing that, and we need to look at what we can do with the job corps. There are all kinds of programs. There's Youth Build that's attached to all of that, and the Housing Authority has programs on Youth Build. We need to put all that together, and but we can do that. The main thing that I would do is I would start looking. People need to look at this. They say, well, wow, there are things that we can do, and Brian, there's more. But what we need to do is we need to develop a pride in our community. I do not see a pride in the community, but we can develop that. And when people open their eyes and say, wow, there is development, and I want my kids to stay here. We don't have that now. We want to, our kids are leaving Monroe. We want to keep our kids here in Monroe. And so, but if we can look at high quality jobs, and we can look at a promise for economic development here, then we can do some real good for the development of Monroe. Looking at the 25-year plan, I might look at some things like you can go along Wilson, and you can look at Wilson and there's a lot of beautiful land there that's available for residential development. But what I would do is I would take an urban developer, somebody who is a professional developer, and I'd like him to go there and take the whole Wilson all the way to Winsboro Road, and so you have a plan there, and it's zoned, and so then you come to the zoo. I love that opportunity of an entertainment zone around the zoo, and you can do affordable housing, but we need to look at all forms of housing, not only affordable housing. We need to look at apartments, and we need to look at high quality housing. But you're developing the area here, and so you turn around and you go back over towards 165, where Tickalaw Road is. That's been on the books for what, Brian, 25, 30 years, and they're not doing anything with it. They had the money at one point in time and then lost the money. But as I talked to Kelsey McCrary with the city, they have plans to develop Tickalaw Road, but they need an urban developer that looks at developing that right. What I would do is I would go over to 165, where you come in towards the zoo, and I would put in a big gate entrance there. And so as people drive by, all of a sudden it catches their eye and they say, wow, look at that. There is a zoo there, and there is an economic development that's there, and they want to turn down that road. Well, that road is embarrassing now. And so that needs to be developed into a real point of pride that comes into the area. There are other little things that can be done that don't cost much money, and that is, there is land out there around the zoo for botanical gardens. People love botanical gardens. They will cross state lines to come and look at botanical gardens. And when they come here, they spend their money, and it's economic development. So those are some of the things that can be done there. But what I want to do is I want to take an economic developer and draw me a rendering that shows what could be done along Wilson, along the zoo, and then going from the zoo over towards 165. Draw me a rendering, and then I want people to pick up that rendering, look at it, and say, "Wow, I want to be there. I want to be a part of this development because this is something good that's going to happen." I want them to take a pride in our community, and that's not something that just happens. We have to make it happen.
All right. So I definitely hear your latest action plan about the Wilson Street corridor and a zoo attracting or attempting to attract higher tourism, especially after COVID. So now individuals do desire to get out and to be entertained. And also you mentioned about an entertainment district as well. Now, is this only you? Because I definitely hear your vision. Is it only you, or you partner up with other individuals, or are you looking for partners? Are you looking for funding mechanisms? Where are we at in that thought process?
I don't have a dog in this fight. I have no money. I don't own any land, and I'm not looking to make any money in this. But I've talked to Pat, and Pat Moore has been very interested, especially in the development of Wilson. So we're not talking about only tourism, but we're talking about quality of life issues where people can find a quality of life in housing. They can live there in a nice area and safe, and lighting and sidewalks and all the things that make a community attractive. Look at the landscape of the area. But that'd be the residential part. And then as you go from the zoo back over Tickalaw Road over to 165, then you look at shopping centers, and you look at, if the city takes a piece of land and they rezone it, and all of a sudden the property becomes, instead of some place where people are dumping cars, they develop a 30, 50, 80-foot industrial site. Will the private sector come in and fill it? If they see a promise and they see a development there, then the private sector will come. If we can divert over to New Orleans along the port in New Orleans, they've done that in New Orleans along the port, and there is over $1 billion of private investor money that's going to come into that area because they've created the environment. We can create the environment here, and we can look at a promise, and so the private sector has more money than the government does, and so but the government can create an environment that the private sector will want to come in. Let's go over towards the where you come at the end of Tickle Road across 165. There's a beautiful triangular piece of land there. You may be familiar with it, but go in there and redevelop that and work with whoever's there and look at developing an industrial site, because industrial site, it brings jobs and it brings more development, and you get rid of now we've gone from 60% poverty down to 40% or 30% or 20% poverty. You get rid of it by doing jobs and doing economic development. And that really is the goal, and that's really the plan. And I want more people to buy into this. Earl Davis, I think, is wonderful, and Earl Davis is buying in with me on this. I kind of joke, Ron, I'm 80 years old, and we kind of joke about my being 80 years old, but you know, God didn't call Moses to service until Moses was 80. And so, but Moses never got to the promised land. God didn't let him go to the promised land. He saw it, but again, his mentors, Joshua, went to the promised land. Right. And so I need to find my Joshua. Maybe that's going to be Earl Davis. Maybe that's going to be you. But again, I need to do what I can. But my focus is here on the south side. What the hell am I doing? Hell, I live over here on the north side. But I see one Monroe only if we can develop the south side. And we need to look at a elimination of the black-white divide. We need to look at an equal economic opportunity, and that can be done. It can be planned to do that. And there is state money to do this. I think I'm going to find out. But Pat Moore and Katrina Jackson and I are going to talk about it next week, and we're going to talk about the plans that we can do. But the other thing we talk about an economic development and an urban developer who draws a rendering and shows the beautiful things that can be done. But again, we're talking about all these other plans. We're talking about after school programs, and we're talking about kids 15 to 25, and we're talking about reentry programs. What we need is we need a full-time paid a person who is an economic developer who works to put all these things together, who has creative ideas to make it happen. And I think that I will ask the state to help us give money to do that also. To me, this makes sense. And then once you start doing this, then you'll open up more doors. So that's kind of what my vision is right now, Brian. And what do you think?
Hey, I just appreciate you still having the fortitude and also the love for the city of Monroe. And I like one city. And you're right, there is a division. There are some barriers, but I'm glad that you are part of the team, that you're willing to sit down and speak to some of the leaders in the community. And you're actually, as I always say, you're being active, you're getting involved, and that's what it's going to take. All of us working together for a better quality of life and Possibly on our next conversation, I definitely want to focus on the reentry aspect because we do have to focus on that, reducing the recidivism. And I believe one of the three main factors in reducing recidivism is education, support system, and a skill set. And we have to focus on that 100%.
There's more than that too, and that's reentry housing, but there's a program for reentry housing, and maybe we can talk about that next time. But a lot of the people who get out of prison, they got no money. Some have family, but some of them don't. They got no place to go. And
Mhm.
so we can look at developing reentry housing for them for a period of time until they get on their feet. And I have a program for doing that, along with medical care. They're big things on the agenda for medical care. I started a research park over here with the School of Pharmacy that is doing very well. And I have made sure, I didn't have to, it was done already, that we have strong Black representation on the board of the research park. And we are looking at DBE contracts. We are respecting what we can do with Black contractors, but it'll produce jobs not only for whites but Blacks and everybody. And so we can join this all together. There are a couple of things that I point of that are of interest. Betty Blakes used to live on Curry Street. She moved over to Lexington. She moved down to the south side. Why did she move over to the north side? And Eddie Clark, he moved out of Monroe. Eddie Clark moved to West Monroe. Why did he do that? So we need to keep those strong people in Monroe, because these are movers and shakers who can help us to develop this. We need a passion in the South Side, like the passion that I feel in my heart to develop this. I need other people to make that passion contagious, to where we say, I want to live here. I want my children to live here. I see promise of what can happen in the city of Monroe, and that's what my goal is. The other thing I thought was kind of a joke when I was running for mayor. I went to a Black church, and the preacher there was named Armstrong.
Okay.
He made a comment to me. He says, you're Armstrong, I'm Armstrong. He says, but we're not related. And I told him, we have the same father.
There you go, Dr. Armstrong. That's right. Hey, I want to ask you a question, make sure that it's okay. I like to continue this conversation each and every month so we can get your input and so we can share it with the people in the community. Would you be open for that?
Let's try to do it, because there are more things that we can talk about. But again, I hope that you could feel the passion that I have for this project, Brian. And once again, I will tell you, I think you are a great asset for the community. I think that your energy that you have developed has been contagious, and I'll see more of it happen here. So I thank you for what you've been doing.
All right, you're more than welcome. Once again, I want to thank you for all you do. Thanks for your passion. And together we will make it better for one Monroe.